Here's the mistake everyone makes the moment the towers crack open. They think power is something you're handed. Bloodlines, divine races, Ichor and Panacea poured down a kid's throat until his mana catches fire. 50 stat points a level if you're a dragon, 7 for whatever Ark woke up as. And yet that boy sitting in the corner of the feast hall, the one they're calling Mr. Skeleton straight to his bony face, was rank 2 in a world you've never even heard of. They're about to learn the hard way. The weakest race in Eden was never the problem. Smash that like if you're rooting for the underdog, and tell me in the comments. I read every single one. An old man stood at the front of a great hall, looking out at the students he'd spent the last 6 months breaking and rebuilding. The new generation, the ones who'd carry the future of mankind on their backs. He smiled. It never reached his eyes. Many of you will not come back. A feast was in full swing in a lavish hall, cutlery clicking on plates, goblets ringing as they met, idle chatter, easy laughter, the whole room glowing with it. And scattered across that hall sat the future of humanity itself. Young awakeners, 15 to 18 years old, gathered for the second awakening. The first had come days earlier, when they awakened a race. Only a handful, the best of the best, had awakened a class as well. But today, the ones who hadn't, the vast majority, would finally get their shot as they stepped into Eden, the land of impossibilities. They wouldn't be awakeners anymore. They'd be players. The dinner ceremony was symbolic, nothing more, not required. But it was a tradition that had stood for over 400 years. What almost nobody knew was where that tradition actually came from, the Last Supper. Because for these kids, this really could be their final meal. Only 6 in 10 awakeners survived the tutorial, and that's the modern number after Eden had been picked apart, studied, mapped, with academies opening across the continent. Back in the beginning, it was far uglier. 2 in 10 walked out, which, honestly, was to be expected. When towers and dungeons came down on Venaris hundreds of years ago, catastrophic didn't even come close. At first, everyone said aliens. Then some swore they were spaceships. They couldn't have been more wrong. A gateway to another realm had torn straight through reality, calling out to the marked to take up the challenge. But nobody was brave enough to walk into a phenomenon they couldn't explain. Governments across the world banned entry, ringing the portals with heavy security and constant surveillance. Then came the first tower break, multiple structures splitting open at once. The entire northern continent was lost, and the world fell into chaos. The same governments that had locked those towers down were suddenly shoving people through the doors, all in the name of survival. It was the single largest massacre of awakeners in human history, and out of it came the age of players. Those who stepped into that world gained races, classes, traits, strange abilities, power that reshaped everything they thought they knew. But it all began with your race. Every awakener first awakened a race in a subspace within Eden, the foundation that skills, class, and traits would all be built upon. Sitting in the corner of the room, hands folded neatly on his lap, was Ark. While his classmates, the same people he'd trained beside for the past 6 months, laughed and stuffed their faces, all he could do was watch from his little corner. Lick lick. So, how does it feel to be a skeleton? A chubby kid waved a braised chicken leg right in front of his face. Must really suck, right? Ark glanced at the boy's sauce-smeared face. The chubby boy shrugged and licked his fingers clean. You can call me Miguel, Mr. Skeleton. And remember, if anything goes south out there. He jabbed a thumb at his own chest and grinned. The mighty Miguel has your back. Ark's eyes trailed after him as he hopped down from his seat and waddled toward the nearest serving table. Who the hell was that guy? He sighed and shook his head. Ark had no clue who the strange boy was, but the kid wasn't far off the mark. Ch! He clicked his tongue, or tried to. The sound came out just fine, but his mouth didn't move an inch. Ark had been reborn into this world as a child, and the moment he learned how the system worked, he'd been over the moon. Most of humanity feared the towers. Ark was drawn to them. Back in his old world, he'd been the rank 2 player in a deep dive RPG, a global phenomenon. Getting to live it for real was a dream come true. So every single waking day, he trained, 101 push-ups, 101 sit-ups, and an 11-kilometer run every single day. While the richer families pumped their kids full of ichor, panacea, and mana-infused potions to stack the odds, Ark had nothing to lean on but his own 2 hands. He had no parents. His elder sister was a civil servant pulling 50-hour shifts every week. Even the cheapest, most basic mana infusement potion would eat 3 months of her salary, and that's if she spent nothing on herself. So Ark bet everything on hard work, praying he'd awaken a race and class that could pull their little family out of the dirt. And then, as usual, life spat right in his eye. A cold pit formed at the bottom of Ark's non-existent stomach. He had never wanted to strangle anyone as badly as he wanted to strangle whoever wrote that message. Why a skeleton, of all things? There were 7 types of races in Eden: common, uncommon, rare, blessed, transcendent, divine, and unholy. Even an uncommon race would have given him something to work with. Instead, he'd landed on the same rung as slimes and giant caterpillars. Race wasn't some flashy title you flaunted to impress your peers. It shaped everything about how you grew in Eden. To put it in perspective, uncommon races like humans gained 10 stat points per level. Rare races like elves gained 15. Divine races like dragons? Up to 50. Yes, 50. And he got 7. The gap wasn't unfair. It was a joke. 5 levels in, a divine race sat at 250 stat points. An uncommon race? 50. Thankfully, most of humanity landed somewhere between uncommon and rare. What were the odds of bumping into a dragon, eh? But the disparities didn't stop there. Your race decided which classes you could even touch. Skeletons couldn't be knights, artificers, or archers, meaning he'd be picking from a far, far smaller pool than everyone else. Ark sighed and dragged a bony hand across his bald skull. Worst of all, he couldn't slip back into his human body to enjoy the banquet, not until a set amount of time had passed. He clicked his tongue. The banquet was winding down, and the principal had taken his place at the podium, tapping his mic. The briefing was about to start. Ark hopped down from his chair and threaded his way through the crush of bodies. Everyone he passed gave him a look, silent, judging. The elves held their corner, beauty every bit as legendary as the novels claimed. The 10-foot giants roared with laughter as he went by, one of them cracking a joke about how easily he could step on him. The Lamias watched him through slitted pupils, every word they traded with each other trailing off into a hiss. But Ark ignored all of it, eyes fixed on the stage. Well, right up until someone slammed into his back. He pitched forward, and then 5 fingers closed around his smooth skull and drove him into the floor. Clack. Ark went down, and the calcium tablets he'd been carrying scattered across the tiles, only to be ground to powder under a minotaur's hoof. Every eye in the hall turned to him. Ark sighed, pushed himself up, and turned around. He knew exactly who it was before that deep, rich voice rumbled with laughter, before that enchanting tone rang out. "My apologies, Ark. I couldn't quite see you down there." Ark turned to face a mountain of a man. Dark hair spilled past his shoulders like a river of black silk, golden eyes glittering with amusement, flawless skin catching the light. As much as Ark hated to admit it, the guy was striking. Those looks had all but stolen the hearts of most of the girls in their year. But that wasn't the only reason they swooned. He was one of the few classmates who hadn't just awakened a blessed race. He'd landed a unique class on top of it. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I am Cain Lancelot, of the Lancelot family." He sank into a mocking bow. "Demon. And warlock." Ark hissed inwardly. This idiot. His game was obvious. He'd introduced himself, and no matter how rude he'd been about it, courtesy, ironically, now demanded Ark do the same. Among the awakened, your race was basically an ID card. With every eye in the room on them, Cain wanted Ark to announce his out loud so the whole hall could have a good laugh. And all of it over a petty grudge. Through their entire time at the academy, Ark had ranked top 5 in every single event. Commoner or not, in combat classes he'd repeatedly wiped the floor with the so-called nobles. Most of them hated him for it, but Cain had taken it somewhere else entirely, and now that Ark had drawn a useless race, he was all too eager to sink his claws in. Ark shook his head and turned to leave. I don't have time for this. He wasn't fool enough to stand there and take it when Kane's intentions were written across his face. That was protagonist behavior, and thankfully, he wasn't the hero of some power fantasy novel. But the second his back turned, Kane's nostrils flared. He'd carved out his precious time to speak to a nobody, and the nobody was walking away from him? He seized Ark's shoulder blade. His eyes went cold, even as he forced out a thin, strained smile. Hey, I'm fairly certain I just introduced myself. Courtesy demands you do the same. Ark glanced back at him over his shoulder, the azure light in his eye sockets flaring like a fire someone had just poured oil on. Fuck off. The whole courtyard went dead quiet. It lasted maybe a second before the whispers came crawling in. Did he just tell Kane to get lost? He's got a death wish, talking to a Lancelot like that. Gotta respect the guts, but man, that was stupid. Even the hero wouldn't insult Kane to his face. Ark got why they were scared. After the cataclysm tore Venaris apart centuries ago, the ones who climbed out of the ashes turned into something close to nobility. They called them the first-generation players, and to this day, almost every top guild answered to one of those names. But honestly, Ark couldn't care less who this guy was, or how big his daddy's name rang in Eden. These so-called first-generation families were just greedy players, chasing power and influence and nothing else, all while eyeing each other across the table. Their purpose as players? Forgotten. If the government didn't cut them a fat check, they'd sit in their castles sipping wine while the world burned. A vein twitched on Kane's forehead. His grip on Ark's shoulder blade tightened. What did you say? The words came out strained. Ark would have raised a brow if he had one. I know your kind is hard of hearing, but I didn't take you for deaf. Again, the crowd reeled. A few students actually backed away, not wanting to be near whatever came next. Read my teeth. F-U-C-K-O-F-F. Or should I write it down on a card for you? That did it. You bastard! With one hand, like Ark weighed no more than a sack of feathers, Kane hoisted him into the air, wind whistling through his eye sockets and slipping out through the cracks in his skull. Kane pulled his arm back and Ark braced himself. The guy had already awakened the class. This was going to hurt like hell. But just as the punch flew, someone every bit as imposing as Kane stepped between them. One clean motion, and Kane's hand was pried loose. Ark hit the floor hard. The boy's hair was golden like the sun, his blue eyes crackling with something electric. Solid frame, hollow cheeks, and a thoroughly exasperated look as he shot Ark a glare. Darius, the hero. This is neither the time nor the place. Darius's voice was flat and hard as he looked between them, his presence alone demanding quiet. Kane was clearly still boiling, but he let it drop. Even he knew better than to cross the hero. Darius didn't come from some towering bloodline. His family was comfortable, sure, but nowhere near the first or even second-generation names. The respect he commanded came down to one thing and one thing only: his class. Classes weren't officially ranked, but that didn't mean power was evenly spread, or that special classes didn't exist. And the hero class was one of a kind. Out of hundreds of students taking the trials across the continent, there could only ever be one hero, which made him the de facto leader of the student body, whether anyone voted on it or not. Boys will be boys. Let Kane have his fun. If the regulars don't know respect, then it should be beaten into them. The snarky voice belonged to a girl who now stepped forward. She had wavy orange hair, unnaturally long, spilling all the way down to her waist, emerald green eyes that glittered with mischief, and freckles scattered across her cheeks. But the things that really caught the eye were the white wings streaked with red unfurling from her back and her feet, which ended in eagle-like talons. Olivia Harrow, Harpy, the class's resident troublemaker in a pretty package. Darius aimed a calm glare her way. Teamwork is essential for our survival. What would happen if we started fighting here? He says that, but what he really wants is total control. Ark sighed. How did he get so unlucky as to be stuck with this batch of classmates? The one thing going for them was their skills. Everything else? Zero. Ark had sunk enough hours into RPGs to know exactly what happened to a team that ran on chaos. Before Olivia could fire back, the mic chimed and the principal's voice rolled out. Gather around, my little duckies. Class leaders, up on the stage, Kane hissed through his teeth as he brushed past Ark, stopping right at his side. He tilted his head, his face twisting into something unhinged. See you in Eden. Then he strolled off to join the hero and the rest of the class leaders assembling up front. Ark clicked his tongue, watching him go, his eyes burning brighter. I'll be waiting for you. Something white flickered at the edge of his vision. Ark turned to see a girl walking toward the crumpled pack of his calcium pills. She scooped it up with fox-like grace, 3 enormous tails sweeping through the air as she lifted the box into the light. Calcium? Her voice was soft but icy, not one drop of feeling in it. Hair even longer than Olivia's swayed as she straightened. It poured down like threads spun out of snow, framing her face, a few strands falling forward over her shoulders. Her fox ears twitched, crimson eyes narrowing in confusion. Then she lifted her gaze to meet his, and a second stretched out between them. You dropped this. Ark couldn't make his mouth work. What is she doing here? The class had 5 leaders, gifted individuals handpicked to lead the young awakeners to victory. It was one of the ways the government had managed to cut awakener deaths down dramatically. With leaders in place, students were far less erratic. They had an authority figure to point their power at. Among those 5 leaders, not one came from an ordinary family. One of them, the hero, came from a relatively new house. The other 4 came from first-generation families, but even among first-generation families, the girl standing in front of Ark was in a league of her own. Soo-jin Jim-sung. Her ancestors hadn't just played a major part in ending the cataclysm all those years ago, they also ran the #1 guild on the continent. Fable. Nearly every player and awakener dreamed of wearing that name one day, which meant Soo-jin was basically worshipped by the entire student body. So why was someone like her talking to him, when most people at her level wouldn't waste a glance in his direction? Thank you, Ark said, keeping his voice flat, and reached out for the medicine when she suddenly slid it to the side. Huh? It happened so fast he almost missed it. Maybe he was imagining things. Surely she wasn't messing with him. He reached again. Her hand shifted again. Ark closed his fingers around empty air. Okay. He was definitely not imagining it. He glanced up at her. Same passive expression, nothing had shifted. Only now, a fan hid the lower half of her face. She lifted her eyes from behind it, met his stare, and waved the pills in the air. Why do you need this? Ark nearly hissed. But the last thing he wanted was a scene, and people were already staring. I need it. He snatched for it again. She slid it past his fingers like it was nothing, like grabbing wet soap coated in butter, almost as if she knew exactly which way he'd move before he moved. What do you need it for? Her eyes stayed fixed on the pack. What the hell is wrong with this woman? Ark wanted to flick her forehead, but with this many people watching, that would spark rumors he really didn't need. That's assuming the entire male student body didn't roast him over a pyre first. I need it to grow. He tried again. Missed again. After he'd received his race, the system had briefed him on its quirks. For starters, he couldn't eat food in this state. The one thing his body actually wanted was calcium, and apparently, taken daily, it would add him an inch or 2. For the first time, Soo-jin reacted visibly. Her eyebrows twitched. Isn't being a skeleton disadvantage enough? Now you have to take pills every... Her voice trailed off as Ark ripped the pack out of her hand. She'd been distracted for half a second. Ark took it. Thanks. He waved the pack in the air and strolled off toward the other students. Soo-jin watched him go, her ears twitching at the faint clicking of bone against bone. Then a small smile crept onto her face, hidden behind the fan. Mistress Soo-jin? The smile died as she snapped the fan shut. Yes? A girl in a black leather suit stepped up beside her, sharp gaze locked on Ark. Her hair was obsidian dark, and her crimson eyes were deeply unsettling, 2 slit pupils glinting dangerously in the dim light. Why concern yourself with a mere commoner? As she spoke, the tips of razor-sharp fangs showed. Soo-jin shrugged. He has a light about him. Her attendant raised a brow. Forgive me, I don't think I follow. Soo-jin waved a hand. You wouldn't understand, Isabella. Then her whole demeanor flipped. "But did you see his reaction just now?" She beamed. Isabella lifted her hands to shield Sujin's face. She couldn't let anyone catch her mistress like this. "He looked like he was about to hit me," she went on, giggling. "I don't think that's something to be proud of, miss." "Sojin!" The principal's stern voice carried over from the podium. She turned, composure snapping back into place, pristine as a noble should be. "Forgive my tardiness," she said calmly, walking over and joining them on the stage. Isabella, meanwhile, turned her attention back to Ark. She knew everything about him, where he lived, right down to what he'd eaten for breakfast that morning. As Sujin's personal bodyguard, knowing those things was the job. So far, he didn't even register on the list of potential threats, but a little vigilance never killed anyone. Her fingers flexed, black claws sliding out on instinct. "Stay away from her," she hissed inwardly. "Vermin like you has no right to breathe the same air as her." Ark felt a strange urge to sneeze. He was a skeleton. Skeletons didn't sneeze, right? He twisted around and scanned the rows behind him. "Is somebody out there talking trash about me?" He didn't get long to hunt for the culprit, though. The principal had started his speech. "Ah, it's refreshing to see you all here tonight. Only a few months ago, you were anxious little awakeners, dreaming of the day you'd become players. I remember how some of you pestered me about speeding up the process, and how much you loathed our boring lectures." He chuckled and pushed his bottle-thick glasses back up his nose. "And now the day has finally arrived, and mark my words, you will miss this academy." The students exploded into laughter. "Miss this dump? Not a chance. Who'd miss those mind-numbing survival classes? You threw me around so much, I swear I've got permanent back pain. The only thing I'll miss is Miss Jennifer." "What? Dude, say that again." "I mean, he's not wrong," Ark mused. Anyone who hadn't sat through Combat Class D just wouldn't get it. The principal, the teachers flanking him, the whole student body, all shared one short, warm laugh. The old man slipped off his glasses and wiped a tear from the corner of his eye. Then the mood turned to stone. "Remember your lessons. Hold our teachings close to your heart, but never be so rigid that you forget how to improvise. By now you know it well. Eden is a dangerous place." A beat of silence. The next word sat heavy on his tongue. "Many of you will not come back." The principal shook his head, slowly. He wished it weren't true. He wished this batch would be the one that broke the pattern. But his heart had been broken far too many times, so many times that he'd forgotten how to hope at all. In a better world, these children would be nowhere near the cruelty waiting for them. But this wasn't a better world. This was the reality they'd been born into. "I have only one piece of advice for you." His voice carried hope and guilt. The principal smiled, his gaze sweeping across the entire hall. Children about to go toe-to-toe with death itself, all for the sake of the continent. Don't die. The clock struck 12. Sparks of electricity crackled through the air, racing across the hall and popping at the edges. And then something broke. 1,000 colors flickered as a fissure tore through space and time, and a chill crashed into the room like a tidal wave. Then a screen bloomed in front of every awakener present. Ark stared at the notification hovering before him. This was the reason he'd survived 6 brutal months in that academy. In this world, the weak existed as stepping stones for the strong to trample. From the moment he set foot in Venaris, he'd made his choice. Chase strength, no matter the cost. He tapped the only answer that made any sense to him. Hell yeah! The instant he read that last line, Ark's vision drowned in a thick, swallowing darkness. The kind that could put a chill in your very soul.